So recently I got a chance to watch the Michael movie, and oh my gosh, I loved the movie. And I wasn't someone who was exposed to much of Michael Jackson when I was growing up, except for, I remember my dad owning the cassettes to the Michael Jackson, some of the Michael Jackson album, and until this day, I remember the cassette cover of the Dangerous album. Anyway, as I was watching this movie, it was my first time understanding who Michael Jackson was. And then after the movie, I literally spent a week researching him, because when I watched it, as someone who works with inner child wounds and as someone who works with adults to heal the inner child wounds, when I watched it from that lens of the inner child, And so for me, what I saw was a little boy who literally touched the lives of millions of people, a little boy who changed the world in a way. And as I was watching it, I noticed so many wounds in that little child, and the wounds that never got healed as he became an adult. And today I wanted to discuss some of those wounds with you guys. We're going to discuss some of the inner child wounds that I saw in Michael Jackson. But the reality is, these inner child wounds aren't just something exclusive to Michael Jackson. You're going to notice that as I share some of these wounds, you might notice you also carry some of these inner child wounds. Now, let's start with that first wound that I saw in Michael Jackson. It's a wound that I talk about in my book, You Are Enough, as well, because it was a wound I carried for a long time. And this wound is actually the wound of, I am loved only when I perform. I am loved for my performance. Now, Michael Jackson was somebody who started performing as early as 6 years old, and then mainstream, I think he was around 10 years old, but he started performing very, very young. Now, he got so much applause and applaud from people with his performance, and his dad perfected his performance, right? He was with parents who really supported his performance, but at the same time, the focus was on his performance. Now, all children, if you have had healthy set of parents with healthy parenting style, which many of us haven't had the luxury of, because it is generational. So our parents did what their parents did, and we as this generation gets to break that. But if you had parents, healthy parents with healthy parenting styles, you probably grew up thinking, hey, I am loved just because I exist. I don't need to perform to be loved. I don't need to prove my worth to be loved. I am loved because I exist. Now, for children whose parents were more critical, punished them, or focused solely on their performance. So in Michael Jackson's case, it was his performance, his singing, his dancing, right? They were artists. In my case, growing up, it was solely on my studies. And so for children whose parents solely focused on performance, these children grew up believing that I am loved only when I perform. I am loved because of my performance. So the problem with that is, even as this little child becomes an adult, this programming hasn't changed. The wound hasn't healed. So this child, as an adult now, still chases performance, still chases perfection, one after the other, because that little boy, that little girl within them is yearning for something. And that little boy and girl, or a girl, is not yearning for more applause. They're not yearning for more accolades. What that little child within is yearning for is to know that you are enough just the way you are. You're worthy just the way you are. You are loved exactly the way you are. You are loved because you exist. And that was one of the wounds that I saw, and I saw how it affected him in his later years. You can see he was a perfectionist. He was chasing the love in people through his performances. So the second wound I saw in Michael Jackson was a child who had lost his childhood. See, Michael Jackson, from a very young age, mainly what he did was just perform, practice, perform, right? He perfected his entertainment as a result, and he was amazing at what he did as a result. But as a child requires play, imaginative play, cooperative play, different kinds of play to actually be well-rounded adults. Play is such a vital part of a child's development. Now, play is also how many of the children transform their stress. So if they don't have play, guess what they're doing when it comes to stress? It's just being suppressed inside their own body. There are no outlets for stress or to relieve the stress. Now, with Michael Jackson too, you can see that he lost his childhood, right? Now, for children who have lost their childhood, as they become adults, they try to make up for it. So when Michael Jackson was making up for it, you can see he was stuck as a child. He was stuck there. He didn't have a chance to fully grow. So he was stuck. And you can see Neverland being created. You can see he was seeking for those childhood experiences in Neverland, in the zoo that was there, in the amusement park that was there, in the way he was with children. He connected with children because that was the age he was stuck in. And yeah, he grew physically, but you can also see how his body didn't adapt well because also the stress, right? As I was saying, the way children cope with stress is actually through play. Play is such a vital part of coping with stress, but also a vital part of childhood development. So one of the things that you're going to notice is even in your life or in adults, when you look around, there are many adults that they're still trying to do things or experience things that they couldn't as children. But the reality is many of the adults are actually grieving, and they're not grieving the loss of someone. They're grieving the loss of a childhood they never had, because it is such a vital part of our development. So grief is such a huge thing when it comes to not having your childhood. So did you experience that? Did you have a childhood that was hard? Maybe you didn't truly get to just be free, to feel safe in the home you were growing up in, to just be a child. Maybe you had to take on responsibilities at a very young age, and maybe it was a responsibility of carrying your family forward, right? And many folks have had to do that, and this is, you're going to find, as adults, they are seeking for what they didn't receive. And as adults, they are grieving the loss of that childhood. So the third wound that I noticed in Michael Jackson, and in many of us actually, is something must be wrong with me. So if you grew up being with overly critical parents or having society say harshful things about you, chances are you grew up believing that those words are true. Now you see, as children, we are very egocentric. We're not looking at the words of our parents, let's say, and going, you know what, my parents have stuff they need to work on, they need to heal. Or they're not looking at strangers' words towards them and going, that stranger has insecurities they need to heal. What the child hears is, something is wrong with me. The child believes the words that come their way. So if your parents were too critical, so in Michael Jackson's case, we all know his dad was quite critical. This is not, remember, this isn't about judging the parents and saying those parents were wrong and judging your own parents as you're listening to it. That's not the purpose of this at all. The idea is to realize that when you have had an upbringing with adults who themselves need healing, and you've heard these words, you tend to internalize these words. You tend to think, yeah, something is wrong with me. I must be broken. And the characteristics you're going to portray as a result, you're going to notice that it was there in Michael Jackson as well. He was a perfectionist. And perfectionist, a lot, if you carry that label, I'm a perfectionist. By the way, I'm a recovering perfectionist, a former perfectionist. And it came from this place of thinking that I had to be perfect to be loved. I had to be perfect to be enough. So when you And I had a critical parent. So in Michael Jackson's case too, you can see that. You can see his perfectionism. But the other problems with that is you also start to not trust yourself. A lot of the adults that I work with, one of the major things I see when they have had very critical parents, parents who have beaten them, parents who have said harsh words to them, is they have lost their own self-trust. And you know, as adults, how important it is for you to know how powerful you are, that you can actually believe in yourself, you can trust yourself. And so sometimes you can see that play in Michael Jackson's life. There were moments where I felt like, wow, he had so much, he knew exactly what he was doing. But then you see moments where he would allow others to influence what his heart already knew he shouldn't be doing. For example, when he knew he shouldn't be doing that tour with his brothers, he knew it, there was resistance, but he didn't follow that heart. Right now, the other thing is the people pleasing. So when we are growing up with critical parents, critical family, we tend to people please because you are the one that's trying to maintain the peace, because you want that peace, and you're thinking, okay, if I make this person happy, if I just do what they want, the stress that I'm feeling will go away. And you tend to people please. But people pleasing never served anybody. When we people please and do something that's not in alignment with what our soul knows we need to do, it always backfires. And I almost felt like when I was watching Michael Jackson movie, Michael Jackson was not in alignment of the Pepsi commercial. He was actually a healthy eater and he didn't even believe in Pepsi. In fact, in the commercial, he actually didn't want to be associated with Pepsi in any way. He didn't want to hold Pepsi. He didn't want Pepsi to show him drinking Pepsi, so his viewers wouldn't have this wrong idea that he likes Pepsi. But see, that's the thing. He was not in alignment with it. He did it because that was part of the tour that his dad had organized. And that was a commercial, one of the commercials, the Pepsi commercials, where he burnt his hair, and which changed the trajectory of Michael Jackson's life, going from someone who didn't even know what painkillers were to someone who got addicted to painkillers. The journey started there. And that is a reality for many of us in our lives, right? We have to really be careful to know what exactly our soul wants. We need to trust ourselves. We need to trust our intuition. How many times have you had a bad experience? You looked back and you said to yourself, you know what? I knew it. I knew in my heart that was a bad decision. Have you had that happen? Comment below. Let me know if that has happened. Happened to me many a times. And we saw that in the movie happening to Michael Jackson. He was not in alignment for that tour. He was not in alignment for that Pepsi commercial, yet he did it. I almost feel like it cost him a future, an abundant future he could have had. Yes, he still had an amazing future, but it could have looked so much different if he didn't have this experience of Pepsi. So that was one of the things, that one of the wounds that I saw. Now, in this I'm not perfect wound, as we're talking about this, I just want to add one more wound into this category, even though it needs a space of its own, it needs a category of its own, and that is body dysmorphia. Now, body dysmorphia was something we saw in Michael Jackson. Now, as a child, and in many of his interviews, he talks about how people commented on his looks when he became a teenager, right? As he's transitioning from a child to a teenager. But as a child, his dad always commented on his nose. And as he became a teenager, people commented on, oh, there's the cute kid. Where's the cute kid? Now he's an ugly teenager, right? And we all have experienced that. I can raise my hand and say, I have experienced that. I've had people comment on the color of my skin. I have had people, when I was a child, comment on the way my teeth looked. And I grew up majority of my life thinking I was not beautiful enough. And it took my own healing to look at the mirror and go, you know what? I am pretty enough. I'm beautiful enough. I am beautiful. Because for the majority of my life, I believed I wasn't. Now, that is something you see in Michael Jackson as well. With his nose surgeries, he didn't have an opportunity to pause and heal. And I created the quantum inner transformation technique. He didn't have that technique at the time to be able to go and heal that wounded inner child and say a different story to that child, so this child starts to see itself differently. I've had clients who came to me saying, and with body dysmorphia, and one of the examples I can remember is a client who told me that their stepmom called her fat, and what they did was they took away her horse, her pony, saying, "You're too fat to ride it." And from that day, she looked at the mirror and she saw herself being fat. Even though this client, mind you, she is far from being fat, okay? She is, I would consider, more on the thinner side. But when she looked at the mirror, before she came to me, when she looked at the mirror, she saw this big person. And that's body dysmorphia. You know, you look at the mirror and you don't see the way you actually look. You see the way people put into your head that you look. Or maybe as that little girl, probably, you know, Michael Jackson, when he looked in the mirror, he never saw his nose after the plastic surgery being quite pretty on its own. To him, no matter how much plastic surgery he did, that nose was always not perfect, right? That's body dysmorphia. And we see that in Michael Jackson as well, and probably you have that. And like I explained, it can come in different forms. You know, that's why we see celebrities, or not even celebrities, if you know someone who has had plastic surgery, if they haven't really healed their body dysmorphia, no matter how much plastic surgery they will get, they won't be able to see their true self. They won't be able to see in the mirror and understand that they are beautiful, you know. And we all can agree Michael Jackson was quite handsome. He didn't need more surgeries, right? But he couldn't see that. And that is also part of this unhealed childhood wound. The other wound that I saw in Michael Jackson was him losing his authentic self. Him going, who do I need to be loved by others, to be accepted by others? So it's almost like Michael Jackson, the way he spoke, the way he dressed, who he became, this greatest entertainer of all times. But I almost feel like it was a wound where he didn't realize was a wound, where he thought he had to be this person. It wasn't what does Michael want now, and who is he, who is authentic Michael Jackson? Did he even have time to sit and ask that question? Who am I really? I mean, one of the things I do feel, I just want to say this because I did feel that in the movie, in watching the interviews, is he was quite grounded in his faith. So I did notice that he was quite grounded in who he was. It was almost as though he knew, I am love, I am light, and that's what I want to spread. I want to shine, I want to spread love. So that really worked in his favor, being grounded spiritually. I find sometimes, you know, if you don't have that grounding, that can really make you wear this mask for the longest time. So I'm hoping he had this opportunity, but I feel like majority of the time, because of the life he led, he continued wearing that mask and did not have the space. I almost feel like he didn't have that safe space where he could take off that mask. And I don't mean a literal mask. I mean this idea of who he is as a performer, who he needs to be for the outside world to love him, not realizing that he didn't need to wear that. It's his childhood wound. I need to become what everyone else wants me to become. So I remember watching one of the interviews where they said, oh, he decided to bring back the curly hair for his last tour. This is it, because that's what the fans wanted, which is great. But I almost feel like, you know, what's his entire life mainly creating what everybody else wanted, and maybe sacrificing a little too much on what does he want, you know. Even the parts where the last concerts he was supposed to do, he didn't want to do 50, and he said that, but yet he chose to do the 50. And I'm sure he had his reasons for it, but when I watched all the interviews, when I studied his entire life story, it almost feels like he did what he thought that the fans needed. He thought what others needed. And I almost feel like he didn't get a chance to be his authentic self his true self, because even through all of it, you can see deep down he carried that light. He was love. He was all about healing the world, you know, and that was quite authentic. That was his authentic side. But there was all these other things that he was trying to do to please others, what he was trying to do that came from his fear of rejection from others, fear of judgment from others. And because of all those fears, he also did a few things that didn't really serve him, when he allowed interviewers into his house, not realizing the intent. And that is part of the childhood development wounds, right? Where you trust people blindly. And and you can notice that with Michael Jackson as well, trusting a few people blindly. He had many good calls as well, but there was also parts where he did trust a few people blindly, that they were there just for the money, right? So as you're listening to this, ask yourself, do you also struggle with that? Do you have a mask on? Have people seen your authentic self? Are you really being you, or are you being what you think the world needs you to be? You know what's interesting is the part that broke Michael Jackson actually wasn't his fame, wasn't his success. I know people see it and view it that way, but what actually broke him was his unhealed inner child wounds. And even for us, right, we have this notion, we live in a world where we think success is going to heal us, and you're probably chasing for it. You think your accolades is going to heal you. You think the recognition will heal you. You think you'll finally feel enough. But this enoughness is just a chase. This idea of healing is a chase. If you haven't healed that childhood wound, if you haven't, or the wounds, if you haven't changed that subconscious programming that is within you because of your childhood wounds. I don't think Michael Jackson actually needed more fame or more success or more Grammys or more hit albums. The reality is, I truly believe deep down, what Michael Jackson needed was inner child to hear the words, you are safe, you are loved just because you exist. You are enough. You are beautiful. I'm proud of you. You know, these were the words he needed, his inner child needed to hear. Your performance does not dictate your worth. Other people's actions does not dictate your worth. Other people's actions towards you does not dictate how lovable you are, how worthy you are. You are enough. You are worthy. And maybe that's what your inner child needs to heal here as well. And maybe those words that Michael Jackson's inner child needed to hear is exactly what your inner child needs to hear as well. So I'm going to invite you to place a hand on your heart and close your eyes. Visualize that 6-year-old version of yourself, or a younger version of yourself. Notice that younger you. In your mind, visualize giving that younger self a big hug. And saying to that part of you, saying to that younger version of you, I love you. I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. I'm sorry I wasn't there for you until now, but from today, I'm going to keep you safe. I'll be right here beside you. You are safe. You are beautiful. I'm so proud of you. You're so gifted. You are loved just because you exist. Other people's actions are not a reflection of your worth, your value, or how lovable you are. You are loved just because you exist. Other people's actions or your own actions does not reflect your worth and your value. You are enough. You are enough. You are loved. You are safe. And with that, you may open your eyes. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey as we analyzed inner child wounds of Michael Jackson. And if you have any questions regarding inner child wounds, send them in the comments and I'll answer those questions in my next video. And if you want to dive deeper into inner childhood wounds or understand as to why you're stuck, you're experiencing the blocks, I have a free complimentary quiz. I'll put the link down below, maybe in the comment section. Click on it and you can complete the quiz and book your complimentary discovery call so we can dive further into your inner child wounds and how quantum inner transformation technique can truly heal your inner child wounds and transform that subconscious programming that's no longer serving you. Remember, you are enough, you are powerful, you are valuable, and you're here with a purpose. Sending you so much love.